Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Maximize Your ROI with Dynamics 365 Finance and SCM Update 10.0.46. I'm Sebastian Anderson with the Licensing and Database Desk here at Avantiico. Arrayed before you is an impressive panel of D365 experts, each bringing valuable insights into the new 1046 update, as well as advice to help you prepare for it. Director of Managed Services and Strategic Initiatives, Chris Barbera, will kick things off with a breakdown of the 2026 One Version Update cadence and best practices. D365 Finance Consultant and Director of Business Applications Consulting, Brandon Nash, will guide us through the finance portion of today's show, including fixed assets, account recon, performance improvements, and more. And finally, Senior D365 Supply Chain Consultant Michael Cavanaugh will cover the latest enhancements and updates in supply chain management, such as tracking attributes, sample management, price calculation without sales orders, and other topics. Chris will be taking over shortly, but before we dive into today's session, I'd love to share some of the other exciting webinars we have coming up. First, on January 13th at 10 a.m. Pacific, join us for Dynamics 365 FNSCM Licensing and Security Enforcement. Starting January 15th, Microsoft's 2026 Gradual Licensing Enforcement will begin. Join us to learn about what's changing, how to determine your organization's unique deadlines and responsibilities, as well as what steps to take now to avoid disruption. If you're managing Dynamics licenses or are involved in renewal decisions, this session will help you reduce risk, control costs, and ensure uninterrupted D365 access for your team. Then, on March 12th, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific, meet us live for Dynamics Day, the future of finance. Kicking off at Microsoft's Irvine campus in Southern California, this in-person Dynamics Day is designed for finance, operations, and IT leaders running or evaluating Dynamics 365 FNSCM. Discover what's new with Update 1047 and experience the powerful combination of Avantiico's D365 native solutions and Microsoft's out-of-the-box capabilities. Through intelligent automation, AI, and Copilot, our solutions reduce manual accounting, improve visibility, and maximize your D365 investment. On top of all that, we'll explore practical use cases and proven strategies for MCP agents, Microsoft Fabric, and Power BI. If all that is making your head spin, don't worry. We'll be there on the ground to answer questions, clarify details, and help you find the right solution for your needs. Space is limited, so be sure to register soon to secure your seat. Registered attendees will also have the opportunity to win tickets to see the LA Clippers live at Intuit Dome, courtesy of Avantiico. We will have more events and webinars added to the calendar, so do be on the lookout for those, and be sure to let us know in the chat if there's anything you'd really like to see from us. All registration links for events will be available in the chat, on our website, and within this slide deck. One last note. As we go through this presentation, do not hesitate to pop any questions you have into the chat, and we will address them in the open Q&A at the tail end of the webinar or in direct email follow-up. And with that, Chris, take it away.
Excellent. Yes, maybe just bring up the next slide. That shows all the dates and such there, I think.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Perfect, yes. Yes, welcome everybody. Maybe just stay on the slide for just a moment here. Welcome everybody. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces. As you know, or if you don't know, we do this every quarter when each of the service updates come out. Of course, we're on version 10.0.46 now. But when already looking out to 47, which is in March, we're actually going to do this session live, which is going to be really exciting at our Dynamics Day. So if anybody's local to the Irvine area, even if you're in San Diego or something, it'd be great to see you there in person. You can corner us for lots and lots of questions there versus the few minutes we'll have at the end here. And it's a really good time to be able to meet everybody, along as with a lot of different peers to get networking going with other people and other organizations using D365. So it's a great time. We had to postpone it a while because of COVID and such, and we're really getting back into it. It'll be really good to see a lot of people in person. So It'd be good to see you guys there. Again, my name is Chris Barbera, Director of Managed Service at Avantiico. I've been working with Avantiico about 12 years and with D365 and various legacy versions about 15 to maybe 17 years. Anything older, more than that, I just sound old. So that's probably what I'll go with here, about 17 years. Joined by a great functional team here and technical team that are going to be the ones that actually give you a lot of the great information today. But before we get started with the finance and supply chain functional updates, I am going to give a brief overview of how service updates work and some recommended dates for anyone that's kind of new to this process. And then when we get to the end, we actually added a new section called platform updates, which will go over some of the more technical changes that you're going to see at 46 here as well as some very interesting AI updates that I think you guys will find pretty interesting here at the end. Okay. So let's go through the overview here. The first part here is if you want to understand what's coming out from Microsoft at a high level, Microsoft publishes 2 wave releases per year that talk about what's coming out in the upcoming 6 months. From there, we actually implement those updates through these service updates, which we're talking about today. So this one, 46, was released late December. So it's implementing some of the features that were discussed in Wave 2. Now there is, I'm not sure why the image isn't showing there, but if you go to this website here, which is a Microsoft website, the AKA MS Release Planner, you can actually see everything that's coming out and actually create your own planner. So things that are interesting to you that are coming out, you can monitor those. If there's any changes, it shows you kind of the business value of the feature, what it's going to do. And I'll also show you, of course, the release dates. Now, know that these release dates are a little bit aspirational for Microsoft. Sometimes they slip or switch, or maybe it was going to be generally available and it's actually only going to be in preview for a while. But it is a very good tool for understanding what's coming out over the next 6 months. Okay, next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now let's focus in on specifically what's in one of these updates that implements these things in the wave release. Microsoft publishes 4 major updates to Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain each year. And they have different things in them. So it has new features, enhancing existing features, platform updates, which we'll talk about towards the end here. But these are things that generally change the user interface, optimize user experience, perhaps improve performance, things like that. Then there's regulatory updates. Think about such things as changes to like the 1099 format, or a lot of international localizations on different local regulations and things could change things, and then those come out as regulatory updates. And then they'll have depreciation of features. Oftentimes, they're bringing out a newer feature, so they're starting to depreciate or not update an older feature, and then they'll generally remove it. We usually get about a year's notice if it's going to be before it gets removed, but not in every case. So it's always important to look at what's actually being depreciated as well, especially if you've customized anything in that area. And then the last section is bug fixes, or quality updates, as Microsoft likes to call them, but they're really bug fixes. Those come out, of course, as every software needs occasional fixes and such. Those are done as well. Now, Microsoft does have something called proactive quality updates that can go in between these major updates, and those happen automatically. So there's still an option for, high security fixes or things that need to be done in between these that are mandatory. Microsoft can take care of that without a lot of interaction from the users or your partner. So Microsoft does refer to these service updates as one version. And why is that? Well, Microsoft requires that you be on the most recent version of the application or at most one version behind. So what that means is if you're on version 10.044 now, this version that just came out is mandatory for you and you need to get that in, or Microsoft will auto update for you, which I'll explain in a minute why that's a pretty bad thing. So there are hundreds and hundreds of updates, as you can see, and changes in each one of these service updates potentially. Our team goes through all of these changes and kind of distills these down to what we think is most important for most organizations and industries, and that's what we're presenting today. Now, if you are an Avantiico Managed Services customer already, you receive most of the information in this deck, plus a little bit of other information, a little more in-depth information already. We sent it out to you before Christmas. And normally, actually, we do this webinar before the update comes out too, but no one was going to join us between New Year's and Christmas, so we figured we'd probably wait a little bit this time. But you do have a little more time, which I'll go into to get the update done. Okay, so Microsoft publishes 4 updates a year. They have released the schedule all the way through 2026. So if you're wondering what it's going to look like this year, 24, 25, and now 26, basically the same release schedule as they had before. very, very close. So there's no major changes there. I mentioned you can skip only one update. So that means at least 2 are mandatory. I would say about half our customers take 2 a year. The other half take all the updates. And it just depends on what type of testing cycle you're looking for. Think if you only take every other update, you're going to be having to test a lot more things, and that's when you're doing it because you're essentially testing 2 updates. And you may want to have the new features sooner. Now, what I mentioned is there's an auto update here. So what happens is if you don't conduct this update yourself and you've already skipped one, then Microsoft is going to put it in for you. What I like to say is auto updates are great for your iPhone, not so great for enterprise applications. Because what happens here is you're changing a lot of features, right? Maybe your ISVs are not going to work. Your customizations may have some issues. Or there could be changes in how the users want to understand how to use the system if there's some UI changes. So it's very important to have a set schedule. Make sure you do adequate testing. You have a good code promotion scheme, data refreshing, and to get this into production well before that auto update date. Okay, next slide here. Okay, so here's the dates that Microsoft has published for 46 specifically. Now, the dates I'm showing you here assume that you have gone into Lifecycle Services and set the optimal dates and configurations to give you the maximum time possible to do this update. If you have not set them up optimally, you'll have less time to do the update that I'm showing you here. And I won't go through all of this, but just briefly, it was released, well, it was published to be released on 12/26. It was actually released a couple days early. And then there's 2 auto update windows. If 46 is mandatory for you, you're still looking kind of in the blue section at the bottom, you can pause that first auto update window, but you can't pause the second, which means that your system is going to auto update starting on 3.14 for your UAT environments, and on 3.21, it's going to auto update whether you want it to or not. So looking at the orange section above, this is really what we recommend as a schedule. You could start as early, I know we're a little past this, it was yesterday. 1.5 is probably the earliest you want to start your review. You want to make sure before that you're trying to get your ISV partner updates to make sure like, hey, FastPath, we're moving to 46. Is there any updates or changes we need based on our version so that they can send you the link? And if you're a managed services customer of ours, we can help you, of course, and then we'll get that in for you. But you still usually have to reach out to your ISV partner for that. So a little longer than normal. You have up to 8 weeks to get the update done. And we recommend that everybody's live on your new version if this is mandatory for you by 2/27. Now you see a 2-week buffer in there between the start of the auto updates and when we're suggesting it. Why is that? We just have to look back to, I think it was 2025 when we had that CrowdStrike issue that took down a bunch of servers. It did not take down D365, but it took down a lot of other systems, and we were supposed to bring several customers to production on a version during that weekend. Because we had that 2-week buffer, we were able to recalibrate and do it the following weekend because the IT teams are obviously swamped with other issues that they were trying to deal with. So that's really the importance to have that buffer. Okay, let's go next slide, please. Okay, I won't go through this, but you'll get the deck. If you want to look through all the updates yourself, these are the many places through Microsoft you need to go and research to actually figure out what all the different updates are. Unfortunately, they don't put it in a really good comprehensive spot, and that's really why we do this webinar. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we're on to the details. We're going to move on to the finance highlights, then we'll go to supply chain, and then we'll move on to some of the platform and AI updates.
Sounds good. All right, now we are into the next half of the show. Just as a reminder, guys, if you would like to ask us any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. We will get to them at the end.
All right, I guess that's my cue to start talking. Hey, everyone, good morning, Brandon. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thanks, Sebastian. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the new feature that has been available, that it was announced as being available for public preview in automatic bank reconciliation matching rules. So even though it was announced that this was available, I'm sorry, not public preview, but public preview, but private preview, it's not available in terms of feature management just yet. So what I'm anticipating is that most likely when this new version 10.0.46 goes to general availability, it will be there for you to enable and test, or it will finally come out and be available for, private or public preview, depending on what Microsoft releases. But nonetheless, this is going to be a very key feature for you to use if you use advanced bank reconciliation, or if you're considering moving to advanced bank reconciliation and moving away from using these standard account reconciliation functions. And what this feature does is it now provides basically a new preview step where there's a new tab called pending match transactions. And so what this allows you to do is it allows you to be able to review the transactions that the system has automatically matched for you based on your matching rules. And so what that means is now the user has the ability to see those results, those matching results, approve or reject those matching results in this preview screen before moving forward with the actual matching and eventual reconciliation. And the key to this is being able to have a little more accuracy, reduce reconciliation errors, reducing the time that it takes to have to go in, reverse a reconciliation, and try to find your matches. And also having to scroll through the lots of transactions that tend to show up in the bank reconciliation matching area. So while again, this preview is not available in feature management as of right now, it will be available pretty soon, I'm sure, because with the modern bank reconciliation interface and all the different things that they're coming up with advanced bank reconciliation, this feature is going to be very key to being able to streamline your reconciliation process at the end of the month or at the end of the week, depending on when you do them. But again, just make note that if you go to those links that Chris had mentioned in terms of looking for the new features, it will be listed, but when you update to the latest version, until Microsoft comes up with potentially a service update or it goes to general availability, you won't see this feature. But just be aware that it will come up and it will be there shortly. Let's move on to the next slide, Sebastian. Okay, so the next thing we have here is we have the account reconciliation agent. Now, the account reconciliation agent feature came out earlier this year with version 10.44, and it basically provided a new way for your organizations to use this Copilot agent interface instead of using the standard SSRS reconciliation report to do a reconciliation between your ledger and your subledger. The subledgers being those in tax, accounts payable, accounts receivable, as well as in banking. And so what this new feature does that has also been enhanced since the new feature, since the account reconciliation came out with 10.44, this new feature update that they have applied here in 10.46 is the ability to now see what is in the ledger versus what is not in the subledger, and what is in the subledger and what is not in the ledger. Those are some key features that can be applicable in any scenario when it comes to your subledgers, and that's the new function that's going to be available to you. I'm going to step aside or take a step away from the presentation and just show you what this feature looks like now that 10.44 or 10.46 has this new functionality. So I'm just going to take the screen share for a minute, Sebastian, and then we'll come back to that.
The reins are yours, good sir.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you can see my screen. So here I'm in the new home, the new immersive home interface when you come into D365. And here you can see I have a list of workspaces and I have my account reconciliation workspace in here. So now there are some configurations that need to happen in the background in order to get this all set up and ready to go. But as you can see, I have my listing of transactions that either have exceptions, those being the ones that are either need to be fixed because there's a discrepancy, or those that have been addressed and those that have been reconciled. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to navigate over to the period of July in 2024, because that's where we have some demo data, and click OK. And as you can see, I can only select one at a time. The system doesn't allow me to select two at the same time. So I'll hit OK in here, and you can see that there are some exceptions already. And so what this new function that has been available with 10.46 is now you can go into here and you can see that you have the ability to mitigate exceptions, and it tells you what those exceptions are. And in this case, they have transactions that are in the ledger but are not in the subledger. And that's very key in terms of understanding where the issues are and how you may be able to fix them. And in this case, you have the ability to go in and look at your voucher and see how the transactions initially came about. And so what this allows you to be able to do is allows you to be able to do some investigation in terms of why we have these discrepancies. And in this case, we have some transactions that were associated with the ledger account for the bank. That's the bank subledger, but it wasn't processed through the bank. And so what you can do is you have a couple of different options here in terms of reversing the entry, creating the journal entry, or matching the exceptions. And in this case, I know that this was done in concert with this transaction here because we have a positive and we have the negative values. So basically there was doing some testing in terms of creating or establishing balances for data migration. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to click this match exceptions button, and I can see I have this negative value here. When I match against the positive value and click match, I'm mitigating my two exceptions by matching. And do you want to continue? And we say yes. And now you can see that these have dropped off. I won't drain this process, but basically this is one of the new features that is available to you on top of some of the ones that came out in 10.44, where it tells you that there's voucher discrepancies and other issues. So now when I look, I can see that this has been fully reconciled, and now I can move forward with my other exceptions that I may come across in my account reconciliation area. So I just wanted to step aside and show you kind of what that new feature looks like in the new version of 10.46 when using the account reconciliation agent in D365. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide when I come back out of the demonstration.
We're just loading in here on the next half.
Perfect.
Go.
And so what we're going to talk about here coming up are going to be what are called fixed asset improvements. So this new feature in 10.0.46 has a bunch of features for fixed assets that are available to us. And one of those I'm going to have just go through this list here is being able to see a couple of different features that are now enabled by default. The first one being the ability to validate the acquisition proposal through a recurring batch job. Now, this process happens in the background and basically addresses a scenario that was occurring in previous versions where the recurring batch job that was used to create acquisition proposals failed with an error in the batch task itself if the journal that was created, or if there was a journal that was created from a previous run and it was manually deleted. So the system wasn't able to basically reconcile those journals that have been created previously and that have been manually deleted while it was also trying to create new asset acquisition proposals. So now with this new feature that's available to us, again, enabled by default, so not something that you need to turn on, you now have the ability to see that work in real time when you run your acquisition proposal batch job. The next feature that's available to you is going to be another one that's enabled by default, and this is the ability to retain fixed asset names when acquiring assets through an AP invoice to make sure that you're able to track the names of your fixed assets for track the different names of a fixed asset that you purchase. So what this means and what the scenario could be is perhaps you track assets, you don't track the assets individually. You may be in a scenario where, let's say you have laptops and you just look at your laptops as one asset value instead of, let's say, hundreds. Well, let's say as you're purchasing those assets, you want to be able to see the different names that are associated with the one fixed asset that these are associated with. And so this new feature allows you to do that. And I'm going to walk you through that demonstration in just a moment before I go through these next couple of improvements. But we'll talk about this one. We'll come back to this one in about a minute. The next option here that you see is the correct inventory sold transactions behavior when the allow asset acquisition for purchasing is disabled. Now, this is enabled by default and it's mentioned as a new feature that's available to you, but unfortunately, after doing some testing, the feature is not working as described. And so basically, there's a parameter in fixed asset parameters form that says allow asset acquisition for purchasing. When you have this feature enabled, it tracks your inventory transactions when you use a stocked item to purchase your asset. You basically purchase it and it gets basically sold into fixed assets. When you have multiple assets on a line or have multiple lines in your purchase order, let's say you have 2 lines of assets that you're purchasing, ideally the system is going to have 2 sold transactions in inventory. When this is turned on, when this parameter is turned off, the system does not do that correctly. So I make this mention because if you're going and expecting to see this happen because you have that allow asset acquisition from purchasing turned off, you would see that the transaction is not quite clean as it should be. And I'll show you a screenshot of the end results of how this works in a moment. And then the last piece here is a feature that is available to you in terms of the programmatic fixed asset transferring between legal entities. This is enabled by Flight, so you have to contact Microsoft in order to get this turned on or do a modification in Visual Studio to get that Flight switch turned over. Now, as far as the fixed asset one I was telling you about, when it comes to the scenario where you have multiple fixed assets that are being purchased, but they are only quantified in one fixed asset, so you only want to track them by name. This new feature I'm going to show you is pretty cool. So bear with me here, and I'm going to take the screen share back.
Take her away.
And let me share my screen. So basically, in the screenshot from the PowerPoint presentation, if you saw, there was a quick screenshot that showed multiple names associated with the fixed asset. So when we look at our fixed asset results, for example, this computer D365 laptop version 10.0.46, we don't have any naming associated with this. And so what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to have multiple purchases associated with this fixed asset, so that way we can track the names of the different laptops that we purchase. So here I have purchase order 260 that's already been confirmed. So now I'm going to process the product receipt for it. And of course, we're just using some manual processes. So for those that use warehouse management, however you do your product receipts, this may not be a process that you use, but that's okay. All right, so we'll just call this product receipt webinar 01 and click OK. And so this process takes place immediately once you start acquiring the fixed asset, because as you know, if you have certain parameters enabled when you acquire a fixed asset through a purchase order, through either product receipt or invoice, then the fixed asset then becomes acquired. It doesn't have its value yet until you do the invoicing, but it's acquired. And once it's acquired, as you can see, we have our name here, right? 10.46.001. And where this value comes from, it comes from the text field in the purchase order itself. So when I go to my purchase order and I go down here in the general tab, I have my name associated with it there. And of course, in my fixed assets area, I've got my fixed asset going. So now I'm going to put invoice in for this, and then we'll do the second fixed asset in a moment. And this moves a little faster.
A little editorial drum roll we'll add in there.
Thank you. Okay, let's do web invoice 01, and we'll just put our invoice as today. We can confirm that we have the fixed asset here, and I will just submit that to workflow, and we'll let that kind of happen in the background. Okay, so now I'm going to go and I'm going to process my other purchase order. Let's do our product receipt here, and then same thing, right? I have my purchase order, I have my line for it, I've got my fixed asset associated with it, and I have some different text, and this laptop is laptop number 2. So when we go to do the product receipt, we'll call this webinar 02. Okay. All right, so now when I come in here and I hit refresh, now you can see, and so basically it's a simple update, but it's functional and very useful if your business scenario requires you to make multiple purchases for the same asset because you're not tracking the assets individually. So when this gets invoiced, we would expect to have our asset books be the total value of both laptops that were purchased. So when I come into invoice and I create a new one, kind of close this off. We'll call this web invoice 02, same date, workflow, submit. Okay. Let's go back one more screen. So those are working and they're going to be invoiced eventually. We have pending workflows that are happening and there's some workflows associated with that. And because we're not, we're not going to go through the time to update and address that. But the whole idea again is that now you have your fixed assets. You'll eventually have your books. So when those assets become actually acquired and they have the value, you'll see the value of the two assets combined into this one, the value of the two purchases combined into this one asset. Okay. The next thing I want to show really quickly is just the end result when I was talking about the purchases when you have multiple purchase orders or you have multiple lines on a purchase order and the inventory transaction for those orders is not displayed correctly. And so let's go through just a couple of examples because I know that I've got to leave some time for my colleague, Michael. We're going to just go to the end result. So the parameter that this is talking about is in the fixed assets module, and it's under fixed asset parameters. And this is just something to look out for if you're going to be managing your fixed assets. So this allow asset acquisition from purchasing. When this is turned on, as you see here, the inventory transactions are reflected correctly in terms of being sold after they are purchased. They're sold into your fixed assets module. When this is turned off, it doesn't capture it accurately. And I'm going to show you a fixed asset where this was the end result. So bear with me here. If I go to fixed assets and I go to, or not my fixed asset, but I go to my transaction. So here we have fixed asset number 9 and fixed asset number 7. Fixed asset number 9, for example, has a valuation of 12,918, which basically was two assets that were purchased on one purchase order. And fixed asset number 7 also has a value of 12,918. Both of them have their respective transactions that you can see here. Okay, when you go to your fixed asset books and you go to your fixed asset transactions that are associated with that particular book, right? 2 transactions each. But now if I go to the purchase order that was associated with these and the items that were used to purchase it, I'm going to go into my released products. And I'm going to go down here to this software database that I use for the transaction. You'll be able to see one of these I processed with that parameter turned on. And this is where you see fixed asset number 7 that had a value of 12,019, 2 sold transactions with 2 purchase transactions. So it was purchased and then sold into a fixed asset. When you have that parameter turned off, even though in the new features it notes that the behavior is going to act accordingly, it actually doesn't. And so that's something that you just need to be mindful of if you're going to be using that parameter and you're managing your fixed assets. Because as you can see, there's 2 purchase transactions, but there's only one that was sold to fixed asset number 9, yet fixed asset number 9 had a value of 12,019, which is basically the value of 2 of these transactions. So that's something that you just need to be aware of and mindful for. So while the new features do come out and they are updated, you do have to just make sure that you do your appropriate testing before you go on to, download those versions into your production environment. And with that being said, we'll go back into the presentation and just talk about a couple of last minute notes regarding some other features that are available in the finance realm. There's been some additional improvements, so performance improvements across a few different modules. In accounts receivable, for example, there's the performance improvement that is has a query structure within the global transactions page. So the global transactions page for customer transactions, for example, as well as vendor transactions, now leverages the organizational hierarchy that's associated with the legal entity that you're in. So that runs a little bit faster. That way you don't have to select all the different companies that you're going to be able to track against your transactions for vendors and customers. There's also been an update on the ledger settlements page in the general ledger parameter or general ledger module. The main account field has also been removed, so you have less filtering and less touching of the form to be able to process. And then there's a couple of new background processes that are associated with subscription billing. These processes use multi-threading and parallel posting function for both sales orders as well as billing deferral recognition being done during the batch processing. So even though you you may not be able to see these in terms of a demonstration, they are performance improvements. So that way, when you're dealing with high volumes of transactions, you're able to move through your system a lot faster.
Everyone loves a little multi-threading.
Hey, we use it all the time here. The last thing is just some additional features that are available to you there. Some of them are more robust than others. Others that are here are listed, but they're not quite yet available in feature management workspace. That's okay because eventually they will be. The latest feature, for example, in AR for structured addresses and QR bill, that became available with the latest service update. So there was the public preview that came out a couple of weeks ago, and then I think last week there was a service update already to 10.0.46. So that new AR feature is available. Your cash and bank management features that you have here, they are listed in the what's new or changed list, but the delay invoice settlement and updates to modern bank reconciliation are not quite available in feature management. And then a couple of others that I want to just highlight is the credit and collections preview that improves the performance of customer interest notes when you're creating those and working with large volumes of transactions associated with your customers. So being able to have that feature that is available. And then lastly, there's a new subscription billing dashboard that's going to be available to you eventually, where you're able to monitor and provide visibility into different areas, provide visibility into different errors of your subscription billing process. Again, another feature that has been listed, but will probably be available in feature management once general availability comes about. So I hope this was informative for you guys, particularly around using and managing, leveraging fixed assets, and just being aware that the features that aren't available when you go in to test, they will be coming out very shortly. And with that said, I will pass it on to Michael Cavanaugh to talk about supply chain management.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brandon, for your finance wizardry. We'll now be hopping over to the supply chain side of things with our expert, Michael Cavanaugh. Take it away, Michael.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Brandon. Let's jump into it and let's go to the next slide. So the first one we want to talk about here is the supply chain traceability with tracking attributes. So what this actually is a new Power App called Traceability. So if you've used Power Apps or not, within D365, you access them through your Power Apps dashboard. It's a separate app that launches. But what it has is a built-in connection to D365 where you can configure specific activities and specific additional attributes that you want to track beyond just the serial number and batch number. And what the system will do is it will capture that information in D365, push it to this new Power App where you can kind of dig further, do where use type queries where you can track down and have a more user-friendly experience when dealing with traceability. I haven't had time really to spend a lot of time with this new Power App yet, but it is one thing that we want to go into and spend some time looking into. But it is out there and available for you with 1046. Let's go into the next one. Thank you. So the next one here I wanted to talk about has to do with unified pricing. So unified pricing was introduced within the last couple releases. They basically redefined how D365 can do pricing for you. With standard pricing, you have trade agreements. You can do pricing based on quantities, dates, but it's pretty limited. With unified pricing, it expanded that significantly. You can now do it all types of different discounts, volume discounts. You could basically base your prices on any attribute within the system that you define. And what they've added here, what this specific feature does, is allows you to call upon that pricing engine with an API. Essentially, you can write apps that query it, that can query pricing without actually having to build an order. So they've made this unified pricing functionality available to other systems and to other apps that you'd like to build, or within D365, you can actually call upon that as well. You can move on to the next one. Okay, and then features that are now generally available. So there's 3 of them I just want to quickly talk about here. So the first one I mentioned is acceptance sampling. If you've been to these last couple update calls that we've had, one of the initiatives that Microsoft has is to really push out and develop their quality management modules. So acceptance sampling is another piece of that, where they allow you to set up acceptance sampling within production, where you can take samples prior to production, after production, and they've built that into the system. Lean manufacturing for planning optimization. Lean manufacturing was kind of one of the last holdouts that was not supported by planning optimization. Planning optimization was introduced quite a while ago, and now is really the only way that you can run master planning in D365. So with 1046, lean manufacturing, Kanbans, things like that are fully supported by planning optimization now. And then finally, I want to talk about cross-company product sharing. So anybody who's familiar with the existing cross-company data sharing framework that D365 has, or if you're not familiar with it, what it does is it allows you to take any table within D365 or supported tables within D365 and allows you to share them across your companies where they only need to be maintained in a single place. So for example, let's say item groups or something like that. You can take that table and copy it and keep it synced between multiple companies. And this has been out for quite some time, but it was not available for products. So with 1046, you can now do that with products. However, there's quite a bit of limitations with this, and it does actually require working with Microsoft to enable it in the first place. But if you do work with Microsoft to do so and kind of go through some of these limitations, like for example, it's not supported with a lot of areas of retail. Like if you're using commerce channels and things along those lines, it doesn't actually work with that. There's a lot of stuff that there's the bugs essentially on the Microsoft side. But if you pass through that and get Microsoft to enable this, you can actually take your products and maintain them in a single place, your release product details, and it can actually be copied across multiple legal entities, and you only have to maintain the majority of the product setups from a single company. Other features that I just want to kind of talk through here. I'll just call it a few specific ones here. One of the ones that we had our eye on was this one that's bolded in the middle there, which is allow inventory transactions consolidation without inventory closing. So with your products, you have a costing methodology set up against those. Every single costing methodology, with the exception of 2, requires an inventory close. And you would probably know if you're doing an inventory close or not. If you have to at the end of the month, you have to run the closing process. But with standard costing and moving average, there is not a closing process. So with inventory that has a costing methodology that you do perform a closing process on, you could always do, you could archive those inventory transactions and consolidate them to help shrink down your database size. But with standard costing and moving average, you can't, because you never closed your inventory technically. So what Microsoft is attempting to do here, it was trying to give you the ability to consolidate old enough inventory transactions for people who use standard costing and moving average to, again, help shrink down those database sizes. This came out in 46. There have been some issues with it. So right now they do not allow you to use it, but it is something we're keeping an eye on because it is something we're interested in. As people have been live with D365 now since it's been out in 2017, one of the things a lot of our clients are looking at are database sizes and the costs associated to that. And this would help significantly for those who have standard costing and moving average. So we'll continue to monitor this to see when it is usable by our end customers, and we'll keep you updated on that. Why don't you go back? Let me see if there's anything else I want to kind of mention there. Another one I just want to call out really quick, the material list and the production floor execution interface. Another thing Microsoft's been doing over the last, let's say, 6 to 8 releases is they've constantly been pushing out new functionalities to the production floor interface. They've added an option now where users can just view the BOM on a production order that they're managing. So it's an option, it's a configuration, but now they can view the BOM. Previously, you were able to like make adjustments to the BOM in certain cases. Now you can just turn it on and view it or have the associate view it. You can go ahead and move on to the next one. One thing I do want to call out before I get to the bolded one here is the second one down, which is Unified Pricing Management Pricing Rule. So I mentioned unified pricing earlier. Again, kind of a new way for D365 to do pricing that's very powerful. One of the concerns that we've seen with our customers is that it does tend to be a little bit slower. So in 1046 here, Microsoft's pushed out a performance enhancement and through testing that has been fairly significant. So anybody who has used unified pricing or has some concerns with unified pricing and performance, there are some improvements here that came out in 1046. On to the bolded one. So create sales orders directly from the navigation pane. So up to this point, I've done a lot of talking. I haven't really been able to demo much because some of this stuff isn't quite ready in 1046. But this is one that we wanted to show here. It's a very simple one, but it will probably affect a lot of you because you can now create sales orders directly from the navigation pane. You don't have to go into the all sales order form or one of the open sales orders or however you do it to create a sales order. So with that, let me show you real quick. So I will steal this screen share. Give me 1 second.
Take it away.
Okay, so I'm in our brand new 1046 environment, and this is a very simple one. If I was to go to sales and marketing and sales orders, there is now an option to create a sales order. So now I can click on that. I don't have to go into an all sales order form, which sometimes those tend to be, quite slow getting into this. So this is much quicker. I don't have to do that. I can navigate through this directly. It pops up my sales order sidecar, and I can go ahead and create my sales order as I normally would. Short and sweet, nice, easy one there. We'll go back to you, Sebastian.
Sounds good. Let the old system boot up here once more.
Okay, no worries.
Go. Seems to be taking a minute. Perhaps Teams is also scraping off the holiday rust, so to speak. Go. And now we should be back to the proper place.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. So a couple other ones I just want to kind of mention here. The outbound shipment processing feature here. It's the second from the last one here. So this says outbound shipping processing policies better handle scenarios where shipped quantities differ from the ordered quantity. So this is one I want to call out because with these outbound shipping processing policies, you can set in the system, you can set it where a single outbound order can only have a single shipment. That functionality has been in the system for a couple different releases here. We could say, I only want to make sure this thing ships completely, this order. However, you can undership that. So whenever you undership it, prior to 1046, you would have to go update your deliver remainder quantities on the sales order. You'd have to shrink them to say, well, I'm not shipping all this, so now I just need to shrink those. It has to match. It was pretty strict in how it did that. But now with 1046, what it does is it says, okay, now when I ship my shipment, I can see you're undershipping. I'm going to dynamically go back to the sales order and decrease your deliver remainder quantities. Beyond that, even when you reverse it later, if you have to reverse that shipment for some reason, it then restores the quantities back to the original deliver remainder that was on the sales orders. So that makes this processing policy much more usable in our opinion. So that's one we wanted to call out. And with that, you can go on to the next page.
Sounds good. We'll go ahead and move things over onto the platform highlight section. We'll be returning the spotlight once again to Chris and our other technical expert, Braden. Go ahead and take it away, guys.
Excellent. Okay, well, before we get into this, as you can see in 46, there's a few things that aren't quite ready, and it is a lighter, it's not what they call a major release. Every other, if the odd numbered one are the larger releases, so you can expect a lot more changes, obviously, in 47. But I just want to call out also that we're going to give you the straight story here. As you can see, there's some things that aren't quite ready or we're not recommending using, and that's one of the benefits of us going through and actually doing some real world testing on these things before we actually present these things. So you know, well, yes, this is what's kind of advertised, but these things maybe you should wait a little while before actually implementing some of these things. So hopefully you guys find that useful and that you're kind of trying to give you the straight story on some of these things and going through just what's listed on the websites here. Okay, so now we're going to move into a new section, platform updates. This is where we're going to talk about some technical and potentially UI changes. Braden and I will be going through that as well as Michael and doing a demonstration. So one of the really big changes in version 10.046 is Microsoft creating called a dynamic model context protocol. And this is really going to change how AI agents and how we in general can interact with the application, really abstracting out the user interface to the functionality, and really enabling AI agents to be able to leverage a lot of the capabilities within D365. Now, if you're like me and not following all this stuff really closely, deeply into AI, I want to give you kind of an overview of what a model context protocol is first, and then we'll talk about how it actually relates directly to Microsoft. So because MCP is not a specific technology or concept just to Microsoft, it is a general technology concept, but then we'll show kind of how it's being applied and how Microsoft is making some changes and leveraging it. So let's look at it from the beginning. When we look at it, we think a large language model, think ChatGPT, Copilot, others. In the beginning, when you could talk to a Copilot or large language model, you could ask it things like, tell me the best price for a flight to London. And it's going to look at like the best days to fly, what airlines fly between those destinations. It may ask you some clarifying questions like where do you want to fly from and what dates, how long do you want to be there, things like that. But it won't give you real-time pricing and it won't be able to book the actual flight for you. So it's great at giving information, but it can't, quote, do a lot of things for you, right? Okay, go to the next one here. So what the answer to that is they enabled this by a large language model like ChatGPT having capability of interacting with agents. So let's say that now I say, okay, I want the best price to London, but I want to find out the real-time pricing, and maybe I want it to actually be able to book the flight for me. So I say I'm going to build my own agent. I'm going to do an agent that goes out and finds the real-time pricing for the flights I want, and it's going to be able to even book it. Now, if I build that agent, I'm going to say go to United, American, British Airways, and I'm going to build an API, or I'm going to use their API to be able to communicate with them and get that information back. Say they're all offering those capabilities. But those APIs or those requests for that information to each of them has to be built differently. And it can be a very specific format through XML or other ways that you need to do that. And that's great, and then that works. But the challenge here is if United, American, or British Air change their API or their policies, now my agent breaks, right? Because I can't get that information anymore. And I have to keep maintaining my agent to the very specific request protocols and processes I need to follow to get that information back. And each of the airlines uses it slightly different way. So as you look to scale something where you want to look at thousands of different airlines and you want to have thousands of people using it, like something that you may want to do with your ERP, this becomes very unmanageable because all these interfaces have to keep being managed and they can break your AI agent. Okay, so let's go to the third one here. So this is where the concept of an MCP comes into place. So here I'm going to focus on just American, but United and British Air would have theirs as well. So now I put my prompt in through my large language model. It comes to my agent, and my agent wants to be able to figure out how to be able to get the flight price and book a flight with American. Now, what the MCP does is it manages the interface between all these different features and capabilities that American wants to have, and they manage both this front end piece called an MCP as well as the back end pieces that are actually doing these individual activities. But the difference here is now instead of my agent having to know these very specific API calls and very specific string formats it needs to send to get the information back, now my agent asks the American MCP, hey, what features do you have and how do I need to interact with you to get this information I'm looking for? And that's where the MCP value is, because all the changes are abstracted out from your agent and essentially your agent can talk to the MCP and figure out what it needs to do. So it's what we call an MCP is essentially a USB-C connector for a large language model. And it really helps build this capability out, because now my agent doesn't have to keep getting updated when there's minor changes or even relatively significant changes to how these individual activities or capabilities from American Airlines, for example, work. Okay. All right, so let's talk about what does this look like directly for Microsoft. So Microsoft in version 10.044 introduced their MCP, but with only 13 very specific business functions, so it's quite limited. Now, some partners chose to actually develop some things on that static MCP with some limited capabilities. But unfortunately, the static MCP now is going to be retired in 2026. So I don't really know the fate of some of the capabilities that were built using some of that static MCP by some of our partners. Here's the exciting part. In version 46, the preview for the dynamic MCP has been announced and is now available for preview. So this is a huge increase of capabilities over what those 13 specific business functions are. Essentially now, through this dynamic interface, an AI agent can work with the Microsoft MCP for D365 and be able to essentially do anything that's on the menus, still respecting your security though. So think about, instead of just 13 functions, if it's on the menu, generally you can manage to accomplish this through the MCP and using an agent. So think about like opening a form, filling out a field, all these types of things it's capable of doing. The other huge benefit here is, imagine I've created a user interface for something that's custom, like I want a loyalty program for my customers, something that D365 doesn't do natively. Well, normally I'd have to write this complex API and be able to connect things to it if I wanted to access that remotely. But because I've added that on the menu, it's dynamically available through the MCP without having to write a bunch of custom code or an API for an external call. Same with ISV capabilities can be in there as well, because now they're on the menu and you can call menu items. There are some guardrails though. So it can't do system administration functions, it can't change security roles, and it is currently limited to certain LLM or language models and clients. It cannot be used in production yet. It's limiting. We suggest really limiting it to cloud-hosted environments, non-Microsoft managed environments for now. But what this means is you can expect a floodgate of new AI agents and features and capabilities that are really abstracting out and leveraging the capabilities of D365 from potentially the user interface and really having this more natural language conversation with doing things within the application or outside the application. Okay, there are probably a lot of questions. Just we'll talk about those at the end. But Michael's actually got a demo here of showing us some of this in action.
All right, go ahead and take control, Michael, if you would like to do so.
I will do so. So just as a disclaimer here, so as Chris had mentioned, Dynamic MCP is now technically available for preview. Our team at Avantiico is working on that, but we don't have a demo of Dynamic MCP quite ready to show. We'll keep you updated on that. Maybe in the 1047 updates, we'll have something there. What I'm going to show now, though, is the static MCP that we have available in one of our environments here. So as Chris mentioned, this is limited to 13 specific functions that can be done, but this is kind of just built to give you an idea of what you can really do here. So what I'm going to do in my environment here, I've opened up my little Copilot bar off to this side, which if you didn't know, your environment probably has this as well. You can turn this on. However, it won't interact with the static MCP like mine will. Normally, if you use it in just a standard environment that hasn't been configured to do so, it's just going to do like internet searching and stuff along those lines, find help articles, things like that. So mine is going to be a little bit more enhanced here. But what I'm going to start by doing here is I'm going to start by asking some information about an item in the system here. So maybe for some reason I don't remember my item number, and I'm gonna ask the system what that item number is. So I'm gonna say, what products have the word HDMI in it? This is a Contoso environment. It's into entertainment and electronics and things like that. HDMI cables is a very classic example in these Microsoft Contoso environments. So, but I don't remember what the item number is, so I can ask my Copilot agent here what products have HDMI in the name. So apparently there's two of them. So A0001, A002. So maybe the 6-foot one is the one that I want to ask about. So I can ask now, how much inventory of A001 do I have? And I can be more specific too. I could ask about sites, warehouses, and it's going to tell me that here in a second. So it's going to return some information to me. It's going to say what I have available and which sites. So it gives me that information, but I can have it break it down further. Like if I have locations set up in some of these maybe advanced warehouses, I can ask about that as well. So maybe I take a look at this and I say, okay, maybe I want to place a purchase order for this item here, and maybe I need to figure out who are my approved vendors first off. So who are my approved vendors for A001? It's going to think for a second, and it should come back with whoever my approved vendors are. So it looks like here it says vendor US 104 and vendor US 101 gives me some approval dates that they're valid for. Maybe I want to ask now which vendor is the cheapest for A001. So then it comes back, asks me a clarifying question. It says, well, what do you want? How much do you want to purchase? And let's say 50 units. So it comes back with the prices at 50 units. So it says, well, so US 101 can get it for $9.75 a piece, and US 104 can get it for $10 a piece. So it tells me that US 101 is the most cost effective for that quantity. But I could always, and I've purposely set this up where there's different prices by the quantities here, but I could ask for a different quantity as well as a kind of a follow-up here. So it's giving me fairly quick, accurate information in this system, which is quite nice. But each of these things that I'm doing is one of those 13 functions that are allowable through the static MCP. Other options here is I can have it create transfer orders. I can have it create purchase requisitions. I can have it do invoice matching, things along those lines. Again, they built these as kind of a way for you to imagine what this can do and how this can work in the system. But with dynamic MCP, we have all the pieces that we need to make it do really anything we want in the system, with the exceptions that Chris outlined, system administration functions and things like that, where it can create orders, process orders, things along those lines. So that's kind of what I wanted to show here. And I think with that, we'll pass it back over.
Right, sounds good. Turns out AI can even help you find the right HDMI cable. What a fascinating modern age we live in.
Alrighty. Wrapping up, something a little bit less exciting than AI, but also to look out for in the system is we do have some changes coming to the query timeout settings that are in the system. So what this is going to do is reduce interactive workload times from around a 30-minute timeout all the way down to 5 minutes. It is also going to be changing the other workload types, except for your OData and batch jobs, down to 10 minutes. Now, if you do have this configured differently in your system settings or for any of these batch jobs or OData jobs, as I mentioned, they won't be affected. But the goal here with this change is to free up your resources faster in your system, prevent long-running queries, or anything hogging memory. I know I've seen a few times where a user maybe has 50 filters on a table, and they're trying to pull a huge query from the system, and then it's causing a bottleneck for not just them, but others hitting that form. So these changes will hopefully help with those kind of issues. Additionally, it will allow the system to recover more quickly when those issues do occur. This will be enabled by default starting in 2026. I believe it'll come around January. The next feature that's going to be coming is telemetry integration with the application insights. So the monitoring and telemetry parameters that are in the system administration menu in Dynamics will now allow you to integrate directly with data management workspace items. So now you can gain deeper visibility into the operations that are going with your data entities and your exports and import projects, and it will allow you to identify and resolve issues a little bit more quickly if you're a user that is using telemetry. If you do have any questions on what is telemetry or more information on this, we do have a nice post on our website. I will try to link that in the chat here momentarily. But this is just a new feature that you can also enable with the other options.
All right. And with that, thank you very much for joining us here today. I will say right here at the end, if you have any additional questions before we wrap up, please feel free to post them in the chat. I know we're close to time, but if you have a few queries that you might want to get off the top of your head, please feel free to ask. If not, you are also always welcome to reach out to us, and we will be happy to help you answer any questions you might have.
And please come see us March 12th in Irvine. It'd be great to meet everybody in person if we haven't already. Even if we have, great to see you guys. We're going to go through. There'll be a lot of great things coming out in 47 as well. That's one of the major releases, and we'll be really focused on some more of the dynamic MCP content. So if you don't already have a managed service partner and you are looking for one, I'll just do a 5-second here that this is the quality of our managed services team. We do extensive work on making sure that our customers know what's coming out. If there's anything we can do to help you out when you're looking for managed services, please reach out to us. So appreciate everybody's time.